Allow me to introduce myself. Who knows what dastardly crime he might perpetrate next?
He's a very clever arch criminal who must be put away. Another innocent victim of this homicidal maniac.
Welcome, everyone, to another week of gaming news. I am Jay Fonzarelli, and while we have a great show for you today, first, a word from today's video sponsor.
A sponsor already?
Hey, it's what I got to do to keep the lights on and to keep you employed.
Well, when you say it like that...
Can you turn that down, please? Oh, just a moment. Does that have to be so loud?
Do you sometimes disturb others when you watch TV? Are you tired of people saying, "My God, Charles, what the fuck happened to your hearing? Turn that shit down." Introducing Listen Up, the sound amplifier that lets you turn up the volume personally without affecting those around you. So if your hearing is not what it once used to be, turn the volume up with Listen Up. And for those of you that can hear just fine, Listen Up can be used in many other ways.
Have you met the new neighbors? I heard she's a real eavesdropping bitch. Girl, isn't that the same guy that was in the Wendy's drive-thru behind us? I didn't want to say anything, but he's been following us ever since we left home.
In an effort to play I'll Show You Mine If You Show Me Yours First. Oh, get your mind out of the gutter. I'm talking about price point here. In its recent Q3 of 2019 earnings report, Sony's chief financial officer, Hiroki Totoki, had this to say on the pricing of the PS5. The PS5's cost is not very clear or visible because we are competing in the space, so it is very difficult to discuss anything about the price at this point in time. And depending on the price level, we will have to determine the promotion that we are going to deploy and how much cost we are prepared to pay. And of course, there are other determining factors here at play, guys, like production costs, manufacturing, distribution, and marketing. Its price point's going to be dictated by all of it. But this quote here is very interesting as it paints a very clear picture for Sony, and that is to definitely try and stay the market leader going into next generation.
They really shouldn't have a problem with that.
But price point is a big deal. Now, Dave, this reminds me, do you remember the time that Sony went up on stage at the very first E3 back in 1995 to undercut the price of the Sega Saturn? Do you remember that?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Anyways, if you could just find that video real quick, Dave, and put it up on the screen. Yeah, so Sega just had announced their latest console back then, which was the Sega Saturn. And they announced that it was in stores in North America at that time for $399. And of course, at that time, Sony Computer Entertainment of America's president, it was Steve Race, I believe. Instead of delivering this big speech he had all laid out to do, he forgoed all that, man, and he just said...
Found it.
Oh, you did? Yeah, we'll just go ahead and play it because it's a cool piece of, gaming industry history. Real cute, Dave.
I'm just playing. Here it is.
$2.99.
Anyway, so as you can see there, he just, left the big speech behind and he came out and just said that $2.99 and walked off. It was pretty epic at the time. You see, back then, in the public's eye, Sega was a major player in the game and in the console space, and... It's just sad. And then the whole rift between Sega of America and Sega of Japan, it was just the start of an epic downfall for Sega in the console space. Not to get off on another subject or anything, it's just at the time I was a huge Sega fan.
Jeez, you about to cry about it, Fonz?
No, I'm not about to cry about it, but in any case, Sony's just waiting to see what Xbox brings to the table in terms of pricing, and it just reminded me of that situation.
Yep, they took care of Sega then, and they're gonna take care of Microsoft now.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that Sony waiting for Microsoft to come out and say their price for the Series X to have that competitive edge over Microsoft, it just reminded me of that time. That's it.
How much they pay you, Fonz?
What are you even talking about? Pay me for what?
Shiny shoes down at Xbox headquarters. Jeez, you defend them a lot.
Dave, sometimes when you read an article and you just get it, it's all about using just a bit of common sense. That's right, a bit of common sense. Let's just go on to the next story.
This is the nature of change. If you resist it, you have frustration and suffering. But on the other hand, if you understand change and you let it flow,
then it's no problem. It becomes positively beautiful.
In a recent interview with Technology Publication Protocol, head of Xbox, Phil Spencer, seems to completely dismiss both Sony and Nintendo as direct competitors.
Well, most gamers have already dismissed the Xbox being a place to play their games anyway.
Well, nobody asked for your opinion here. As I was saying, in the article, Phil states the following. When you talk about Nintendo and Sony, we have a ton of respect for them, but we see Amazon and Google as the main competitors going forward. That's not to disrespect Nintendo and Sony, but traditional gaming companies are somewhat out of position. I guess they could try and recreate Azure, but we've invested tens of billions of dollars in cloud over the years. Now, this is not something that's necessarily new, as we've heard Phil and company talk of the future of gaming and how one day it will succeed beyond consoles. It's not that he's completely dismissing Nintendo or PlayStation, but in my eyes, I see this as not only a way to stay ahead of the game when it comes to the future of game streaming, but I also see this as a way for them to gain more acceptance outside of the US. I mean, if you look at it right now, both Nintendo and PlayStation both have huge acceptance everywhere, and you got to remember, it's software that's king in this industry, and Microsoft just wants to sell more of it. And because these countries aren't really big on buying Xbox consoles themselves, Microsoft is just providing different ways these gamers can access their software through different mediums they may already own. You know, things like PCs, tablets, or even cell phones. After all, many of these Asian countries are huge mobile gamers, so this global approach makes perfect sense. But I'm sure you've seen gamers out there pull this quote way out of context and flip it and try to make some fanboy narrative out of it, but in the end, it just makes sense, especially given how much Microsoft has invested in its cloud servers and services. And you have to admit, they do have a leg up on Sony and Nintendo in that space. And for those of you worried about consoles leaving the gaming space in favor of streaming, that's in the very distant future. Phil has stated himself that consoles are still going to be there for those players that demand it. I mean, if you think about it, they still have the Series X to release later this year, and that's at least a 6 to 7 year run, and then they'll have something after that, I'm sure. I'm a console gamer for life. I will continue to buy consoles, and I know millions out there are just like me. So in the end, it's all about that global reach for Microsoft. What are you doing?
Shoe shining for Xbox. Shoe shining.
Are you done? Anyways, for anybody out there who's running with this narrative that this means lesser quality games for Xbox because they're no longer competing with the PlayStation or Nintendo, well, that's ridiculous. As we've already had Gears 5 this past year, we've got Halo Infinite coming up with a brand new engine, should be a huge experience, and of course they already announced Hellblade 2, which looks insane. After all, they still need to compete, and even with a service like Game Pass, you still have to have the games to sell it.
Because nobody will buy turds, even if they're polished.
What?
My grandpa always used to say, selling turds to somebody just won't work, even if they're polished up.
Yeah, I think you flubbed all that up. I get the gist of what you're saying, though. I get it. I think we all get it. But really, Phil is just simply saying here that they're focused on getting their games out to a wider audience, folks. And of course, be the market leader in cloud-based gaming. This is just how I interpret it. You know, when I read these articles, I try to keep the fanboy BS out of it, and I just read it for what it is, and this is how I see it. But I will leave a link to the article in the description. You guys can go read it, come back, and let me know in the comment section down below what you feel he's saying. And of course, I will read every one.
Jeez, why you gotta say it like my dad scolded me or something?
Oh, it's just for effect. Anyways, in other news, Stadia is said to have a free tier coming soon. Currently, it's $10 a month, plus the cost of the games. But soon, folks, there will be a free tier where all you have to do is buy the games at full price. Sound good to you, Dave?
You couldn't pay me to play on that service.
I'm with you. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to view this video right here. And if you enjoyed it, please hit that like button. And if you liked it enough, share it out to all your friends. And if you're new here and haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next week. Until then, try to be the best possible you. Be kind to one another. And of course, as always, game on.